My name is Dana Chandler. I have been accused of double homicide and I am innocent. Those words were spoken by a woman who has spent more than 2 decades fighting for her freedom. But for her daughter, those words are impossible to believe. July 7, 2002 began as an ordinary summer Sunday in Topeka, Kansas. But inside a quiet home on a residential street, 2 people would never wake up. Mike Cisco and his fiancée, Karen Harkness, had spent their Saturday evening together. They drove to a casino about an hour outside of Topeka, spent a few hours playing games, and left just after 1:30 in the morning. They stopped for coffee on the way home. It was the last time Karen Harkness was ever captured on video, alive. The next day, a family gathering had been planned at Karen's house. Relatives thought the couple might be announcing their engagement. When no one answered the door, Karen's father grew concerned. He entered through an open sliding door and called out. No response. He headed downstairs to the bedroom. What he found would haunt him for the rest of his life. Karen Harkness, 53 years old, had been shot multiple times. Mike Cisco, 47, lay nearby. He had also been shot multiple times. They were both dead. The scene told investigators everything and nothing at once. The rest of the house appeared undisturbed. More than $1,000 in cash sat untouched. A Rolex watch remained on the nightstand. Other jewelry was left behind. This was not a robbery. Detective Richard Valois was the lead investigator on the case. He arrived to find a scene that defied easy explanation. The killer had made their way downstairs, fired multiple rounds into Karen Harkness, then multiple rounds into Mike Cisco. Whoever did this wanted these people dead. They wanted to make sure they were dead. Mike Cisco worked as a salesperson for a welding company. Karen Harkness worked in the hospitality industry. Both had been married before, both were divorced. They had been dating for about 4 years and were well liked by everyone who knew them. Mike had custody of his 2 children. His daughter Haley was 17 at the time. His son Dustin was 15. Karen had 2 children in their 20s. For Haley, the news came as a shock she could barely process. She arrived at her grandmother's house and immediately saw police tape surrounding the property. Her grandmother sat inside and told her simply that her father and Karen had been shot. Haley's relationship with her father had been complicated in those final months. By her own admission, she was a difficult teenager. Her dad had given her an ultimatum: follow his rules or move out. She chose to move in with her boyfriend. That defiance made Haley and her boyfriend persons of interest to police. They were questioned. They were polygraphed. Their alibis checked out. Karen's children were also questioned, polygraphed, and cleared. But when investigators spoke with friends, family members, and co-workers of Mike and Karen, they heard the same thing again and again. You should look at Dana Chandler. Dana Chandler was Mike's ex-wife. They had been married for 15 years before a bitter divorce in 1998. Mike's sister Kathy described Dana as someone who never quite fit in. According to family members, Dana had a drinking problem during the marriage. After the divorce, her behavior became increasingly erratic. She would call Mike constantly. She would show up at his home at odd hours. There was one incident that Mike's family never forgot. The kids were upstairs in their rooms when everyone heard a noise in the backyard. In the middle of the night, Dana Chandler was jumping on the trampoline. Mike kept track of these incidents in a day planner. July 28th, Dana stalking neighborhood at 8:30. Caught her. She left. November 12th, Dana came in house while I was at Karen's from 7 to 11. Went through stuff. When Karen Harkness entered the picture, the behavior escalated. Mike's brother-in-law Mark believed Dana became obsessed with the fact that Mike was moving on with his life. The last time Dana showed up at Mike's home was in the spring of 2002, just months before the murders. According to Kathy, Dana went there to talk about moving back in. She told Mike that the kids were getting older, that they had issues now, that they needed both parents. She thought she should move back in and they should parent together. Mike told his family that the harassment had reached a point where he and Karen now feared for their lives. 9 days before the murders, Mike went on a fishing trip with his brother-in-law, Mark. Sitting on the boat, away from everyone else, Mike turned to him and said something that Mark would replay in his mind 1,000 times. "You're going to wake up and find me dead, and I want you to know who did it, Dana Chandler." But Dana Chandler lived 8 hours away in Denver, Colorado. There was no sign she had been in Karen's house the night of the murders. No DNA, no fingerprints, no witnesses. As the investigation began, one question haunted everyone involved. How could someone drive 8 hours, commit a double homicide, and leave absolutely no trace behind? 4 days after the murders, Detective Richard Voloy called Dana Chandler to inform her of Mike's death. The conversation was brief. Voloy asked when she had last spoken to Mike. Dana asked few questions. She did not seem concerned. Due to a technical error on his part, only Voloy's side of the conversation was recorded. Dana would later say she was very upset on that call, but there was no recording to prove it. The next evening, Chandler called the Topeka Police Department and left a message on a different officer's voicemail. "My name is Dana Chandler. I got a registered phone call last night. Someone said that my son had been killed. I'm just calling to see if that's true or not." Dana would later explain this call was simply seeking confirmation. But given the personal nature of the murders, the absence of burglary, and the stories of a messy divorce and stalking, Dana Chandler became the main suspect. Detective Voloy decided to talk with Chandler in person. He recorded the audio 4 days after the murders, but again there was an issue with the recording. Most of the conversation was inaudible. Voloy recounted what she told him. Dana said she had been at home on Saturday morning, July 6th, then made a couple of errand stops. She bought cigarettes, snacks, and a car cigarette lighter at several stores around Denver. She got gas, but there was one purchase on her credit card receipt that Dana failed to mention: 2 5-gallon gas cans. Voloy wondered why she didn't tell him about them. He wondered why she would even need gas cans at all, unless she had been planning a trip to Kansas and didn't want to stop for gas along the way. According to Voloy, Dana also said that after running those errands, she went home to her Denver apartment. She had no visitors. She had no contact with anyone. The next day, she got up and went for a drive in the mountains at 10 in the morning. But Voloy couldn't verify that Dana was in her apartment the night of the murders. He couldn't verify that she took a drive in the mountains the next day. The area Dana described driving through would have meant passing Rocky Mountain National Park surveillance cameras. Those cameras were checked. There was no sign of her car. Investigators also reviewed Dana's cell phone records. She tended to use her cell phone frequently, but around the time of the murders, there was a 27-hour window where her phone wasn't used at all. There was still no DNA, no fingerprints, no forensic evidence of any kind tying Dana to the killings. The gun used in the murders hadn't been found, though investigators learned the bullets were from an Israeli weapons manufacturer. Dana would later say she didn't even own a gun, but family members remained convinced. They pushed for a meeting with the district attorney. Mike's brother went into that meeting wanting to know if the DA would pursue a circumstantial case. The answer was no. Without the murder weapon, they didn't have enough hard evidence to move forward. Mike and Karen's families grew increasingly frustrated. They decided to take action themselves. Mike's sister Kathy and their mother went searching for clues. They lifted manhole covers. They looked inside rest stops. They thought maybe she threw the gun somewhere. They found nothing. But Haley, Dana and Mike's daughter, was also working the case. She felt the need to do something. She didn't want to sit back with her hands tied. In 2005, 3 years after the murders, Haley began secretly recording conversations with her mother. She was trying to learn what happened to her dad and Karen. "I think that the only way I can really move on with a relationship with you is if we can get it. If you can just tell me yourself that you did it." Dana's response was consistent. She didn't do it. She didn't know what happened. Haley asked about the 27 hours with no cell phone activity. Dana explained she was in the mountains. She didn't have a signal. Dana insisted she had nothing to do with the murders. But she did say something that Haley could never forget. "Ever think about killing him?" "No, but I did." The official investigation seemed stalled. In 2007, nearly 5 years after the murders, authorities asked a former New York City Police Department detective to review the case files. He issued a report concluding that Dana Chandler was the only person who had the motive, means, and opportunity to commit these murders. 2 years later, a new district attorney decided he was willing to take a chance with the evidence they had. He chose to move the case forward and arrest Dana Chandler. In July 2011, law enforcement zeroed in on Dana Chandler in Oklahoma, where she was staying. With cameras rolling, they surrounded her car, guns drawn. "Step out of the car. Both hands out of the car." After nearly a decade, Dana Chandler was in custody, charged with the murders of Mike Cisco and Karen Harkness. In March 2012, Dana Chandler went on trial. The prosecution began by referring to those conversations Haley had secretly recorded years earlier. "I could kill him. I thought about killing him." The prosecutor told the jury that these were the words of the defendant about her ex-husband. The prosecution suggested a motive. 2 days before the homicides, they said, Dana called Mike. During that 5-minute phone call, Mike told Dana that he and Karen were going to be married. But there was no recording of that call. It was an allegation, not proof. The defense argued that the case against Dana Chandler was all speculation. There was no evidence placing her in or near the Harkness residence on July 6th or 7th, 2002. But authorities had questions about exactly where Dana was during that time. Detective Voloy said she told him she was home Saturday night and then drove through the mountains the next day. But Dana's business acquaintance testified she told him something different, that she slept in her car in the mountains the Saturday night of the murders. "She told me that the story she was giving me was the truth, and the story that she'd given to law enforcement was not the truth." Prosecutors pointed to the 27 hours without cell phone activity. Haley had accused her mother of trying to avoid being tracked. Investigators found another instance when Dana didn't use her phone a month before the murders. No calls registered. Some calls came to the phone, but none were picked up. Prosecutors argued that this was important because during that time, a month before the murders, Dana may have been conducting a dry run. They called her friend to the stand. The friend testified that Dana told her she had driven to Topeka. She had gone to Mike's house and entered through a window when no one was home. She had also gone and sat outside Karen's house. The prosecution presented evidence that in the 6 months leading up to the murders, Dana called Mike and Karen more than 600 times. The defense argued she was calling to talk to her kids, but Haley remembered differently. Haley testified that her mother talked about her dad a lot. She felt her mother was obsessed with him. An FBI analyst testified that Dana often called late at night and frequently made repeated calls in a short time period. On June 3rd, she made 17 calls in 18 minutes. Both of Dana's children testified for the prosecution. They said their mother had a history of stalking their father. Haley recalled her mother taking her and her brother to go spy on their dad. They sat in the car, watching the house. Her mother told them they were going to be her little helpers. Haley went up to the house with her mother. They looked in all the windows. Her mother was looking for something inside, thinking there might be a woman in there with her dad. Haley also testified about the recordings. During one of them, Dana, who attended Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, gave an explanation for why she bought those gas cans. She said she ran into a woman who had run out of gas at an AA meeting and went to get gas for her. The woman asked for money, but they don't give people money at AA. The prosecutor told the jury that she believed Chandler used those 2 5-gallon gas cans to have enough fuel so she would not have to stop and potentially be seen near the crime scene. But Chandler's attorney argued there was no proof she was ever in Topeka during the time of the murders. No eyewitness placed the defendant in Topeka, Kansas on either July 6th or July 7th, 2002. The closest law enforcement could come was a gas station nearly halfway between Denver and Topeka. A clerk there wasn't sure, but she thought she might have seen Dana the night of the murders. She was 70% sure that was the woman who had been there. But by the time Chandler went on trial, that clerk had died. A different worker from the gas station testified about seeing a black car that looked similar to the one Chandler drove, but she thought it might have had Virginia license plates. There was no receipt from that gas station. The defense questioned whether Detective Voloy investigated other suspects. Two men with criminal records had stolen checks from Mike Cisco and cashed one after the murders. But one of those men was in jail when the murders occurred. In closing arguments, the defense reiterated there was no forensic evidence linking Chandler to the crime. For 9.5 years, they had tried to put her in Kansas when this happened, and they had come up empty. The prosecution reminded the jury of Dana's stalking behavior. They told the jury that Mike had gotten a protection from abuse order against Dana, a court order saying she had to stay away. The protection from abuse order did not stop the defendant, they said. After 2 weeks of testimony, it took the jury 83 minutes to reach a verdict. Defendant would please stand. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree. Haley felt better knowing her father's killer was paying for their actions, but she didn't feel better that her mother was capable of killing her dad. At sentencing, Haley asked that her mother receive the maximum sentence. She told the court they each had a deep scar in their souls from what this monster had done. But Chandler also spoke. Most importantly, I deny that I murdered Mike and Karen. I am innocent. Dana Chandler was sentenced to life in prison. For years, Haley's thoughts were consumed with proving her mother killed her father. With Dana in prison, Haley was relieved she could concentrate on other things. But her relief was temporary. Dana Chandler immediately began filing motions to appeal her conviction. Her attorneys cited the actions of the prosecutor. In particular, statements made at trial about that protection from abuse order. Mike got a protection from abuse, a court order. He applied and said, "Hey, judge, please order this woman to stay away from me," and the judge agreed. But when Chandler's appeal attorneys went looking for that protection from abuse order, they couldn't find one. They went through the whole case. They looked for every possible order. There wasn't one. In 2018, they argued that the prosecutor's actions constituted prosecutorial misconduct. They contended that Chandler never had an opportunity at a fair trial. The Kansas Supreme Court agreed. They described the prosecutor's actions as intolerable acts of deception. They overturned the conviction. The court determined there was still sufficient evidence to retry Dana Chandler if the district attorney chose to. When Haley found out the verdict was overturned, she was shocked. She wondered what it meant. Would the DA's office retry her? Karen's son Chad had a different view of the prosecutor's actions. Now, all these years later, they were still having to live through this again. He said it wasn't right, it wasn't fair. The decision whether to retry Dana Chandler fell to a new district attorney. He analyzed every aspect of the case and concluded that justice demanded they move forward and pursue another trial. Pursuing that trial would take years. Dana Chandler remained incarcerated. She and her defense lawyers fought against having another trial. They argued she should be set free. For Haley, the delays seemed endless. Dana and her lawyers filed nearly 400 motions, requests for a change of judge, requests to retain an investigator, requests for bond to be reduced, requests to disqualify the district attorney's office. Through it all, she fired several of her lawyers. She went through 7 lawyers in periods of representing herself. There were dozens of hearings. One included Haley being called to testify with Dana doing the questioning. For at least 45 minutes, the suspect in the killing of her dad had the power to question her on the stand. Not just the suspect, her own mother. Haley said it was awful, but she was willing to take whatever steps necessary to ensure her mother would stand trial again. If Dana could bring out something to prove where she was, to say she didn't do it, prove she didn't do it, that would be for both of them. But she couldn't, and she hadn't. An organization called Miracle of Innocence got involved, advocating for Dana. They believed in her innocence. When they looked at the case, Nothing connected this lady to the crime. The co-founder of Miracle of Innocence had been wrongfully imprisoned himself and had his murder conviction reversed. He said that before sending someone to prison, the case needs to be more convincing than the one made against Dana Chandler. No evidence, no fingerprints, no DNA, no confession, no weapon, no witnesses, nothing. Dana and her attorneys raised other issues as they tried to get the case dismissed. Some allegations related to a 2009 news broadcast. Chandler accused law enforcement of forming a partnership with the news program to film an episode aimed at convincing the public that she murdered Mike and Karen. But the various arguments to dismiss the case were unsuccessful. Chandler's new trial was scheduled for the summer of 2022. Before the trial began, news outlets again tried to speak with Dana Chandler. She said she would only agree to an interview if her $1 million bond was paid. The request was declined. Chad Harkness was relieved the DA's office decided to retry Dana Chandler, but he was concerned about going through this yet another time. Just the kids having to relive this again made him sick. Haley was also not looking forward to another trial, but said testifying again could give her some control of the situation. The passage of time had left Haley with so much loss. Loss she held her mother responsible for. As a mother herself now, her feelings were even more complicated. When asked if she thought of her mother as mother or Dana, she said, Dana. Mom was an ugly word to her. She didn't even like her kids to call her mom. In the summer of 2022, Dana Chandler was on trial for the second time. As in her first trial, the defense focused on all that was lacking in the case against her. No evidence she was in the Harkness residence. No evidence she was in Topeka. No evidence she was in the state of Kansas. The defense insisted Dana Chandler was in Colorado at the time of the murders, more than 500 miles away, and faulted investigators for zeroing in on her. Everything they looked at, everything they examined, excluded Dana. The lack of physical evidence was acknowledged by the prosecution. Science was not going to solve this case. It was not based on DNA. Instead, the state focused on evidence such as Dana's hatred of her ex-husband and his girlfriend. The case was based on jealousy, rage, and obsession. Prosecutors presented evidence they said showed that obsession. Records of more than 600 phone calls Dana made to Karen and Mike in the 6 months before the murders. Witnesses who said Mike and Karen told them some of those calls were menacing. Karen's co-worker said she had been up all night receiving phone calls from Dana. She was afraid, very afraid. Karen's daughter testified that her mother was scared of Dana. She spoke about messages she heard Dana leave on her mother's phone. Horrible names. In addition to testimony about calls Dana made, there was also attention paid to when there was no call activity on her phone, specifically during those 27 hours the weekend of the murders. Authorities believe Dana Chandler's phone was turned off, so it could not be traced as she traveled to Kansas. Prosecutors told the jury about the AutoZone receipt showing the purchase of 2 5-gallon gas cans. They questioned why Dana didn't tell them about them and why she would need them. And there was the issue of Dana Chandler's alibi. According to the detective, a changing, unconfirmable one. One witness testified that Dana said she was in the mountains at the time of the murders, but the detective testified Chandler told him she was at home in her Denver apartment. A friend of Dana's testified about something authorities thought might have been a dry run. She said about a month before the killings, Dana called and told her about a trip she made to Mike's home. She went into Mike's home through a window. After that, she went to his girlfriend's house and sat outside waiting for them to come home. On August 25, 2022, the case went to the jury. The wait to find out what the verdict would be was a long one. That day came and went, as did several more. After about 4 days, Haley started to get nervous. She started to think that this actually could not come back with a guilty verdict. She thought about that possibility. She prayed. She trusted that if Dana did get away with this, life would have to go on. After 6 days of deliberating, the jury informed the judge they were deadlocked. 7 votes to convict, 5 to acquit. Two members of the jury who voted to find Chandler not guilty said they never saw actual evidence that Dana Chandler was ever in the Harkness home. They couldn't send somebody to spend the rest of their life in prison if they couldn't even prove she left Colorado that weekend. Everything that was tested for DNA proved inconclusive. But for another juror, the state's depiction of Dana Chandler's behavior was persuasive evidence. He found those conversations Haley recorded with her mother to be convincing and voted to convict. When he comprehended that Dana said she had thought of killing Mike, that was the piece that pushed him beyond any question of reasonable doubt. There was a split verdict, but the majority of the jury was in favor of a conviction. The district attorney decided to retry Dana Chandler a third time. Her lawyers convinced the court to reduce her bond, which allowed her to be released with supervision as she awaited the next trial. The court directed that she have GPS monitoring. After spending more than a decade incarcerated, Dana Chandler celebrated her freedom with supporters from Miracle of Innocence. Anyone getting out of prison after any length of time experiences a joyous occasion. As a condition of her release, Dana was not allowed to contact her children. Still, Haley worried about her safety. She was scared to death that Dana was going to hurt her or affect her kids in some way. Haley's fear only grew when Dana made a post on social media. Chandler complained about her treatment at trial and in the background showed images of Haley's children. Dana had somehow learned which church Haley attended and downloaded a live stream of a service to create the photos. Haley found it chilling and disturbing. She felt it was a direct message to her. Intimidation. For trial number 3, jurors would be from a different county. The defense had requested a change of venue, and the judge agreed, citing excessive media coverage. It would take place 60 miles away from the previous setting. The trial began with opening statements in February 2025, and in a last-minute change on the morning of opening statements, Dana Chandler dismissed her defense attorneys. "My name is Dana Chandler. I am innocent. I did not kill Mike and Karen." For the third time, Dana Chandler was on trial, but this time she was representing herself. She was exercising her constitutional right. It was unexpected. Once again, Haley testified. When it was time to be cross-examined, Haley knew it would now be her mother doing the questioning. She went up there with her game face on. She knew it wasn't going to be cordial or thoughtful. Dana Chandler challenged Haley about her description of events. Chandler said it was Haley's father who had been behaving badly, not her. Haley was in disbelief. She knew her mother just made that up because it never happened. Dana Chandler not only represented herself, but when it was time to put on her defense, she decided she would be her own main witness. She testified over 7 days, speaking for about 20 hours. She addressed her drinking. She addressed inappropriate conversations with Haley. She apologized for things she had said. She disputed making frequent, harassing calls to Karen and Mike. She said when she called, she was calling to speak with her children. She testified she never had any confrontations with Karen Harkness at all. She pointed out what she said was sloppiness in the police investigation. She asked the lead detective whether police were too focused on her and should have been looking more thoroughly at other possible suspects. After 18 days of testimony, the prosecution and Dana Chandler presented their closing arguments. The state described Chandler losing control of Mike as he planned his future with Karen and the rage that followed. They said that led to the defendant traveling to Topeka on July 6th and murdering them on July 7th. In Dana Chandler's closing, she told the jury that the prosecutors had failed to meet their burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she killed Mike or Karen. About 4 hours later, the jury delivered its verdict. We, the jury, find Dana Chandler guilty of murder in the first degree. After hearing the verdict, Dana Chandler turned away. It was the verdict Haley had hoped for, but the end result was nothing she ever wanted. "It is so much worse that my mom is the one behind these murders. We lost my dad and Karen, but through all this now, we've lost our mom. I really wish it was someone else." Dana Chandler's supporters remained undeterred. They still believe she is innocent. They don't believe the evidence proves she is guilty of anything. The district attorney is certain the jury convicted the right person. He has confidence in his prosecutors and how they handled the case. More than 20 years have passed since Mike Cisco and Karen Harkness were murdered. Haley wants to make sure the lives lost are not forgotten. She tries to tell her daughter about who her dad was. She tells her he was a really fun, supportive, encouraging guy who believed in her and her brother. She tells her that Karen was so kind, so accepting. Dana Chandler is filing motions for an appeal. The legal battle may continue. But for Haley, the personal battle never ends. She lives with the reality that the woman who gave her life took the life of her father. I miss him a lot.